The tension inside the courtroom was suffocating, like the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. The benches creaked under the weight of journalists, spectators, and Diddy's family, all shoulder to shoulder, locked in silence. At the center stood the prosecutor, sharp in his dark tailored suit, gripping a battered file whose edges were frayed with age. His fingers tapped against it, slow and deliberate, like a drummer setting the pace for an oncoming storm. Across the room, Diddy sat at the defense table, his posture rigid, too forced to be natural, too steady to be comfortable. His lawyer leaned in, whispering quick and sharp, but Diddy's eyes weren't on him. His gaze was fixed on that folder, as though he already knew the ghost it carried, and dreaded the moment they were unleashed. Before we go deeper into this powerful story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapter. Now let's get back to it. The judge, gray-haired and stone-faced, leaned back in his chair, gavel resting inches from his hand. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He knew when something heavy was about to break. The silence was so sharp you could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the shuffle of someone's coat, the soft thud of a pen dropping on the floor. Then the prosecutor moved. One step forward, slow, deliberate, his eyes cutting through the room before landing on Diddy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but razor-edged, "there are truths that have been buried far too long." The words sliced through the stillness. Somewhere in the back, a woman gasped. Another clutched her notepad tighter. The prosecutor flipped open the file, just enough for the first row to glimpse the yellowed paper and faded photographs inside. Whatever they saw, it shifted the room instantly. Curiosity dissolved into unease, and unease hardened into dread. This wasn't routine questioning. This was a reveal that could shatter the entire defense. A reporter in the front row scribbled furiously, while a camera clicked twice, freezing the tension into black and white frames. From deep in the gallery, someone whispered, "This is it." But their voice was swallowed by the silence that followed. The prosecutor didn't rush. He let the weight of the pause of that folder settle into every single chest in the room. Diddy's jaw tightened. His eyes darted, just for a split second, toward the exit. And that tiny flicker said it all. Whatever was inside that folder, he did not want it spoken aloud. The entire room felt suspended, trapped between anticipation and fear. All eyes stayed locked on the prosecutor, who stood steady, one hand resting on the table, the other gripping that weathered file like it was more than paper, like it was a weapon. The edges were torn, the ink fading, but the energy radiating from it was undeniable. It wasn't just a folder. It was a loaded gun waiting to fire, and every person inside knew it. Diddy sat motionless at the defense table, his shoulders drawn tight, his eyes narrowed, unblinking. His lawyer leaned in again, whispering something urgent, but Diddy stayed locked in. He wasn't watching his attorney. He was watching the prosecutor, the way a man watches someone holding the detonator to a bomb. Every creak of wood, every shuffle in the gallery echoed like thunder. The judge leaned back, gavel close at hand but untouched, knowing one thing. When the file opened, the room would never be the same again. The stillness in the room fell heavy, the kind that warned something explosive was about to drop. A reporter's pen froze mid-stroke, hovering over her notepad as if even the smallest distraction might cost her the moment. A camera lens snapped, once, twice, catching Diddy's clenched jaw and the faint flicker of unease dancing in his eyes. The prosecutor's footsteps echoed across the wooden floor, each tap louder than the last, slicing through the silence like a metronome of doom. He opened the worn folder just enough for the first row to glimpse a stack of photographs, grainy, yellowed, stamped with dates that reached back decades. A ripple of gasps rolled through the gallery as Diddy's fingers twitched against the table, betraying the tension he was trying so hard to mask. The prosecutor's voice cut through the quiet, low and sharp, each word carrying the weight of something lethal. "Some truths," he said, eyes scanning the room. "Don't stay buried." The way he spoke forced everyone to straighten in their seats, as if his words alone carried the power of a confession. In the back, a woman clutched a necklace around her throat, wide-eyed, while a man shook his head slowly, bracing himself for what was coming. But the prosecutor didn't rush. He let the tension stretch tighter and tighter, the seconds ticking louder than the clock itself. Whatever was inside that folder wasn't just evidence. It was dynamite, and everyone in the room knew it wasn't a matter of if it would explode. But then, he turned one photograph toward the jury. At first, it was nothing but a shadowy figure in a dark alley, the image blurred and unclear. But under the courtroom lights, the truth took shape. A younger Diddy stood frozen in black and white, time-stamped, with a man beside him whose name had long echoed in criminal whispers. The gallery erupted in murmurs, a wave of disbelief crashing across the benches. The defense attorney shot up, voice sharp, hands raised. Objection! But the prosecutor didn't flinch. He didn't even look his way. He placed the photo down, calm, unshaken. The truth, he said, steady and deliberate, always finds its way into the light. Another photograph slid across the table. This one cut deeper. It wasn't just a meeting. It was an exchange. And the man standing beside Diddy in that picture wasn't just anyone. He was tied to one of the most notorious incidents in the city's history, an event that had never been traced back to anyone powerful, until now. Jurors exchanged sharp glances, pens flying across notepads as if they couldn't write fast enough. In the front row, a woman slapped her hand over her mouth while the judge's brow furrowed, his gavel tapping once, not to silence a crowd, but as if to mock the gravity of the moment. Diddy sat back in his chair, forcing his face into stillness, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. His fingers drummed a rapid, uneven rhythm on the table, too quick to be casual. The prosecutor reached back into the folder, and this time he didn't pull out another photo. He slid a single sheet of paper onto the stand, a sworn statement signed and dated. The clerk took it, unfolded it, and began to read aloud. The silence that fell was electric, the kind that strikes seconds before lightning. This wasn't about recent months. This was about history, a history Diddy believed buried forever, now clawing its way back into daylight. Each word from the sworn testimony echoed like a hammer strike against the wooden walls. There was no vague language, no protective legal jargon. The statement was sharp, damning, undeniable, tying Diddy's name to events the courtroom never expected to hear spoken aloud. Spectators shifted uncomfortably, the air growing heavy with every sentence. Diddy's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, but Diddy didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on the paper as though sheer willpower might erase it. But the more he stayed, the deeper the words seemed to carve themselves into the minds of the jury. The prosecutor stepped toward the evidence display, his movement slow, deliberate, like a man who already knew the damage had been done. His voice cut through the room once more, steady, unshaken. This, he said, gesturing toward the statement, is not speculation. And with that, the weight of history came crashing down, pulling the trial into territory no one had dared to imagine. This evidence wasn't speculation. It was corroborated, backed by photographs and sworn testimony from people who had nothing to gain. The prosecutor let the silence stretch, his eyes sweeping from juror to juror. If this court ignores it, he finally said, then justice has no meaning. A ripple of gasps moved through the gallery. It wasn't just the words that landed. It was a certainty in his voice. He wasn't suggesting a theory. He was delivering a conclusion. The judge's expression tightened into something unreadable, though the hard clench of his jaw spoke volumes. He motioned for the prosecutor to continue. And just like that, the trial shifted. This wasn't simply a case anymore. It was the unearthing of a past meant to stay buried. Then came the next exhibit, a short audio clip. The bailiff pressed a button, and static filled the speakers before a younger voice broke through. Familiar, unmistakable. Diddy's voice. Not polished, not rehearsed. Raw, unfiltered. And what he said was the kind of thing that, once heard, could never be forgotten. The jurors froze. The gallery leaned in. The defense attorney slammed his palm against the table. But the damage had already been done. The only question now was how far the prosecutor was willing to push, and whether Diddy had anything left to fight back. The audio cut off, but its echo lingered, heavy and dark, over the courtroom. For a moment, no one moved. No shuffling papers. No coughs. No whispers. Just silence thick enough to suffocate. The prosecutor didn't speak immediately. He let the tension hang, eyes locked on the jury like he was daring them to look away from the truth. Then, stepping into the center of the room, he said slowly, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was not an accident. That was not out of context. That is who he was, he toned, pointing directly at Diddy, his words sharp as a blade. And I'll show you that's who he still is. The defense attorney shot up. Objection. Inflammatory. But the judge raised his hand before he could finish. No ruling. No lifeline. Just that cold, impenetrable stare. In the gallery, people traded wide-eyed glances. Some leaned forward, hungry for more. Others shrank back, unsettled by what they had just heard. Either way, the prosecutor had them. Every single person in that room was caught in his narrative. Diddy shifted in his chair, jaw tight, fingers tapping the table. For the first time in the trial, he didn't look like the confident, untouchable mogul the world knew. He looked cornered. His lawyer bent close, whispering urgently, but Diddy's eyes stayed locked on the floor, like he was still trying to process the words that had just been weaponized against him. The prosecutor lifted a slim folder, holding it aloft without opening it. "Inside here," he said, his voice steady, "are documents, signed, dated, verified, that connect the voice you just heard to action stretching back years." He didn't open it. He didn't have to. The weight of his words alone had already wrapped the room in silence, the suspense tightening with every second. The judge leaned forward, both hands gripping the bench. His tone was flat, but the command was clear. Proceed. Everyone knew. The next move could decide the fate of this entire trial. Diddy closed his eyes for a moment, like a man bracing for an oncoming storm. But when he opened them, the wave had already begun to crash. The prosecutor's fingers slid under the folder's edge and flipped it open. His lips curved into the faintest smack, as if he already knew what was coming would strike harder than anything so far. Every rustle of paper echoed louder than it should have, like the courtroom itself was amplifying the tension. He pulled out a single page, held it high, then laid it carefully on the projector. The big screen lit up, dates, signatures, and a name that made the gallery collectively lean forward in shock. "This," the prosecutor said, tapping the paper flat with his hand, "is a sworn affidavit from someone who stood closer to the defendant than most people will ever be. Someone who kept his secrets, until now." The words hung in the air like a noose. He scanned the jurors, his expression unreadable, like a poker player watching the table. From the defense table, Diddy's head snapped toward the screen. His lips moved, muttering something too low to catch, but the tight set of his shoulders gave away the storm inside him. His attorney scribbled furiously, then leaned in to whisper. Diddy didn't look up, didn't even respond. His eyes stayed locked on the glowing words, like they were burning into him. The prosecutor clicked to the next slide. A photograph appeared, grainy, but undeniable. Diddy, at a private event, surrounded by men who were now either locked up or under investigation. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. A low murmur rose before the judge's gavel came down. Hard. "Order! Order in the court." The prosecutor never flinched. "This photograph," he continued, voice cutting through the chaos, "was taken the very night a deal was struck, a deal that set off a chain of events we are still feeling today. And the man who captured this moment, he is in this building, ready to testify." For the first time, Diddy's eyes flicked toward the courtroom doors, as if half expecting them to burst open at any second. The weight of the moment pressed heavier than the cameras ever could. The gallery was buzzing. Whispers, stays, disbelief thick in the air. Some had come expecting drama. But this was a kind of reveal that could flip an entire trial upside down. And then, without warning, the prosecutor stepped back from the projector, folded his hands, and said simply. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. The bailiff moved to the side door. Everyone in the room knew. The next 60 seconds would decide everything. The door creaked open. A shadow stepped through. Every head in the gallery turned. Every breath caught in chest as the bailiff guided him inside. A man in his late 50s, hair silvered with age, posture sharp, unshaken. In his hands, a single leather folder, edges worn like it had been gripped 1,000 times. Diddy's eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles in his face pulse with each breath. The witness crossed the floor and took the stand, slow and steady. He never once looked at Diddy. The prosecutor approached, each step deliberate, stretching the moment thin. State your name for the record. The man's voice was low, gravel-edged, but every word landed heavy. He spoke his name. The sound hit like a brick thrown through glass. Reporters in the gallery erupted into motion, pens flying, whispers buzzing. Some stared wide-eyed, disbelieving. This wasn't just a witness. This was a ghost from Diddy's most guarded, most dangerous chapter. A chapter no one thought would ever crawl into daylight. The prosecutor wasted no time. He pulled a document from the folder and slid it toward the stand. "Is this your signature?" The witness nodded once. "And did you personally observe the events described here?" Another nod. Jurors leaned forward, eyes darting between the man and Diddy, like watching the final moves of a chess game only one side didn't know it was losing. The prosecutor's tone sharpened. "Tell the court what you saw." The man cleared his throat, and the first words out of his mouth cracked the air like a gunshot. He painted a picture. Years ago, a penthouse bath in neon, bass-heavy music rattling the glass, champagne flowing, laughter sharp, and faces in the room that would later haunt headlines. As he spoke, Diddy's composure frayed. His fingers tapped, too fast to be casual. His gaze sank toward the table. Every few seconds, he glanced sideways at his attorney, who refused to meet his eyes. The story unfolding wasn't vague. It was vivid. It planted images in the jurors' minds they would never unsee. The gallery was frozen. No coughs. No whispers. Even the sound of the witness pausing to sip water felt like a thunderclap. The judge's eyes flicked to the jury, measuring every reaction. Then, mid-testimony, the witness turned. For the first time, he looked directly at Diddy. The room seemed to stop breathing. "You remember that night," he said, his voice like iron, "and you know exactly what you promised." The words landed like a blade twisting in the heart of the defense. The prosecutor's mouth curved into the faintest smile. The tide was shifting, and everyone could feel it. "Your Honor," he said, turning back toward the bench, "with the court's permission, I'd like to enter Exhibit 47 into evidence." The judge gave a slow, deliberate nod. The bailiff moved again, carrying a thick sealed envelope to the bench. The seal broke with a soft rip. Inside, a stack of glossy photographs, each one more damning than the last. The first slid onto the projector. The big screen lit up, bright, sharp, undeniable. The jurors stared. The gallery gasped. And for the first time, Diddy didn't just look cornered. He looked trapped. This case was backed by photographic evidence and sworn testimony from witnesses with nothing to gain. The prosecutor let the silence linger, his eyes scanning each juror before declaring, "If this court ignores it, then justice has no meaning." Gasps rippled through the gallery, not because of the words, but because of the conviction in his tone. He wasn't offering speculation. He was presenting truth. The judge's expression hardened, his clenched jaw betraying what his face concealed. With a gesture, he urged the prosecutor to continue, but the atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was the unearthing of a past carefully buried. The next piece of evidence was an audio clip. Static filled the speakers before a younger, unmistakable voice emerged. It was Diddy, not the polished version the public knew, but raw, unguarded, and unfiltered. The words that followed were ones that could never be unheard. The jurors froze. The gallery leaned in. The defense attorney slammed the table. But the damage was already done, spiraling beyond control. The question now was how far the prosecutor would go, and whether Diddy had anything left to shield himself. As the clip ended, silence swallowed the courtroom. No whispers, no coughs, just a heavy stillness. The prosecutor stood in it, locking eyes with the jury as if daring them to deny what they had just heard. Finally, he stepped forward and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was not an accident. That was not taken out of context. That was who he was." He pointed toward Diddy, his voice slicing the tension. "And I'll show you that's who he still is." The defense attorney leapt to object, but the judge raised his hand before a ruling could be made. The gallery exchanged wide-eyed glances, some leaning closer, hungry for more, others sinking back, unsettled. The tension had tightened its grip, pulling everyone deeper into the prosecutor's narrative. Diddy shifted uncomfortably, jaw clenched, fingers drumming the table. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked trapped. His lawyer whispered frantically, but Diddy's eyes stayed down, processing the words now weaponized against him. Meanwhile, the prosecutor turned back toward the evidence cart, ready to reveal what came next.